Hey guys, it's Ross going on the Space Couch. Today I want to talk to you about sailing on light, or solar sailing as it's also known. Now, solar sails or light sails, they offer the possibility of high-speed travel across the depths of the solar system. Photons, while they have no mass, they travel at the speed of light and they exert pressure on things that they impact. So therefore, photons hitting a solar sail will eventually impart enough momentum that the sail will build up a lot of speed, far faster than any conventional rockets, although it would take some time to build up to that speed. And once it starts, it'll keep going in accordance with the laws of motion and momentum, it just goes straight on. As there's no fuel requirement as such, other than maybe say a few little bits for thrusters to adjust your position, it's a potentially very low cost, long life operation. Essentially it has no moving parts other than say the CubeSat nanosat that deploys the sail around it. Now, however, you do have to make sure that any spacecraft built with a solar sail, or any spacecraft built, regardless if it has a solar sail, has to take account of the solar pressure. For instance, any ship or satellite travelling to Mars from Earth will be blown off course, as it were, by the solar winds by thousands of kilometres over the course of the journey. And yes, let's say best case scenario, that journey's 55 million miles. That's still thousands and thousands of miles away off course. Not so off course that you could not still see Mars from your window, I expect. But even so, then having to recalculate to get back into the position, it'd be very difficult. Modern spacecraft do account for this in their designs, but this is possibly, and I don't know this, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, why some of those early spacecraft that went to Mars missed it and were lost, Maybe they didn't fully take account of the solar pressure and just sailed off into the void. I don't know, maybe. So anyway, this concept of solar sail, light sail, has been around since the days of Johann Kepler, so hundreds of years. Now, he noticed that comet tails always point away from the sun, regardless of the direction the comet is travelling in, whether it's heading towards the sun or away from it, the tail always points away. So I didn't actually know that until recently. I thought that's a very interesting concept, but it does make sense. The solar winds blowing off the sun would blast it as in the streamer behind you, regardless of your direction of travel. Now, it was James Clerk Maxwell, like the father of electromagnetism, who proved that light does actually have momentum and thus can exert pressure. Maxwell's equations are quite important in physics. They provide the foundations for this, and they have done since the 1860s. In fiction, Jules Verne first mentions it in From the Earth to the Moon in, I think it's about 1865. At the same time as Maxwell was coming up with his equations, so he must have been using what was then seen as an ultra-modern concept, like, say, Interstellar, the movie, was all about black holes and the latest theories on that sort of thing. Now, in Earth to the Moon, that was the first time solar sailing arose as a theoretical and a practical concept. Many other scientists, including Einstein, have actually helped develop the equations relating to mass, energy, and momentum that you would need to be aware of if you were deploying a solar sail. Now, the first attempts to actually build one, however, it started at JPL in 1976 for a mission to Halley's Comet. Though obviously that never happened. I think it was the Giotto probe by the Europeans was the one that made it to Halley's Comet. However, the Planetary Society, first under Carl Sagan, of course, in the 1970s and 80s, and today under Bill Nye the Science Guy, who is now the head of the Planetary Society, they've long championed solar sailing as a low-cost means of exploring the solar system. Now, they could operate like, say, an interplanetary shuttle in the inner solar system, or as, say, exploration craft further out to Neptune, Uranus and beyond. So worlds like Chariklo, for instance, that we've mentioned in the past. Some of those Kuiper Belt objects like, say, Sedna or Eris, perhaps, who knows? And they'd be hauling both people and cargo. Apparently, the solar sails, you can get pretty close to the sun, because obviously that silver material reflects a lot of the heat, I suppose. As close as a quarter of an AU. So let's say essentially the Earth is, 100 million miles roughly away from the Sun. That'd be 25 million miles. Is that about half of Mercury's orbit, I think? I'm not sure. Something like that anyway. It's certainly much closer than anything we've ever been able to send to orbiter in the past. That'd be very useful for monitoring the solar weather and other things. So, how long would it take to get you anywhere using a solar sail? To Jupiter, 2 years. To Saturn, 3.3 years. Uranus, 5.8, and 8.5 to Neptune. Now, obviously, we've got the New Horizons to Pluto, which is going to be doing its flyby in a couple of months. It has taken 9 years to get from Earth to that distance, 30 plus AU out, whatever the final figure is. So it would be faster than that, you know, and that was the fastest spaceship ever launched. So, yes, solar sails. I mean, you know, apparently they could even get to the Oort cloud in 30 years. That'd be like launching a mission like Voyager, you know, that's going to be exploring for decades. So that could be very interesting, very useful as an explorer craft. Especially with the rise now of these CubeSats and nanosats, where you can just use like iPhones and iPads and tablets to control all the functions of your spacecraft. And in fact, they are essentially the spacecraft. Also, speaking of solar sails, however, any Mars colonization scenario would be very useful to have these large light sails reflecting the sunlight from orbit down onto the planet's surface. That would obviously help warm up that surface, crucial in terraforming. I'm sure Elon Musk is all over that. I would hope so. Anyway, I'd love to know what his Mars colonization plans are, because you know he has them. What else could you do? You could also fire Earth or space-based lasers at a ship that has deployed its sail, help impart more energy and mass onto that sail, and that will help propel it to higher speeds. Now, this is described in quite a lot of detail in the Buzz Aldrin book, Encounter with Tiber, which I read about 20 years ago. And it does actually, interestingly, seem that a lot of the technology mentioned in that book is starting to come to pass. These light sails, for instance. There's also talk in there of what is essentially like, say, the Virgin Galactic White Knight 2, Spaceship 2, or the Stratolaunch version of that type of plane. Very interesting. 20 years ago, I remember reading it thinking, oh, this is incredible, this will never happen. And now, certainly, it's funny. Sometimes you have to go a decade or two to see changes in technology really have an impact. Just think of what phones were like 20 years ago and what they are now. Also, in fiction, solar sails. As I mentioned, Buzz Aldrin, Jules Verne. Count Dooku's ship in Attack of the Clones is also has a solar sail. I think the Vorlons and Babylon 5, but you know, their ships, you could never really figure out what it was you were looking at, so I'm not certain, possibly. I think there's also been episodes of, say, Doctor Who and Deep Space Nine have used ships that have solar sails, and Tron, the movie, amongst others, those giant light sail ships that they have as cargo carriers in the Tron world. So it's a popular concept, one that appears to be coming to fruition. The Planetary Society has actually got a light sail 1, it's called, in orbit at the moment. Now, they have been having some technical issues with that, and that I think they've lost the uplink to the spaceship. So I don't think it has deployed its sail yet. The reason they know that is if it did, the atmospheric drag of the atmosphere, even though it's like however many hundreds of miles up there, it would mean it would be coming crashing back down to Earth much quicker. If it hasn't deployed its sail, it'll stay up there for a while. They'll have more time to figure it out. But even if this one does burn up in the atmosphere, as it will do eventually for whatever reason anyway, this is just another proof of concept. They're actually launching the Light Sail 2 next year in 2016, the Planetary Society. And that is the version where they're going to see if they can navigate about a bit, you know, deflect the sails a little, see if they can maybe turn around, see if they can literally sail and manoeuvre. And that is a very important test. I really hope that works out. That would be fantastic. Anyway, guys, that was just an overview of solar sails and sailing on light. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this content. Leave me a comment or suggestion for an upcoming topic you'd like to see discussed, or hit that big high five.